It was just this Christmas that went by and things were getting busy. I had to start buying presents for the whole family. I just finished shopping, but I still needed to grab a present for my little cousin. She wasn't very hard to shop for since she is only 4. She liked things like Peppa Pig and My Little Pony. She really liked, and I say liked for a reason, Max and Ruby. So when I decided to go looking for a present, I figured something like a Max and Ruby DVD would have been perfect since she liked to watch it on a daily basis. However, Christmas meant that most of the online DVDs were sold out in most places. I went to look on eBay as well, but figured that I couldn't trust what the condition of the DVDs would have been in, so I was stuck in a rut for a while until that package had arrived. I was at home still scrolling for a stupid DVD until I heard the sound of something being pushed into my letterbox. I got a hold of it before my dog did and looked at the package. It seemed to be wrapped fairly badly with what looked like grease marks and stains on it. Naturally, as anyone would, I decided to open the package. Inside was something that I could not explain. It was a Max and Ruby DVD, but it was nothing like I had seen online. It was like some little kid had drawn on the front cover with a marker. The title was just Max and Ruby with what looked like a poorly drawn illustration of Max and Ruby in the front. There were no names or anything, but on the back it had a list of 4 episodes, all with blunt titles. Episode 0001, Episode 0002, Episode 0003, and Episode 0004. I quickly gave the DVD a watch over, and to my surprise, all of the episodes were in completely perfect quality, and seemed to have no flaws. It was as if it was just an actual DVD, but with a homemade cover on it, instead of the typical ones you'd see, commonly printed on DVDs. The only thing that I thought was odd was the episode selection screens. The episode had names, but they were all titled Max and Ruby 1, with the numbers being changed as it went down the list. The actual selection screen was just a plain white screen with black text and nothing else. After giving it much thought, I decided to change the cover to something a little nicer by printing out a DVD cover that I had found on Google and had tracked down. I also wound up finding all the names of the episodes so that they were labeled correctly. So I left the episode list screen alone because I figured it was pretty self-explanatory. Christmas went by and things were fine. I gave my little cousin her DVD and she was happy with it all throughout Christmas. But that was only because she hadn't watched it yet. On Boxing Day, my family had gone out for lunch and had left me to babysit my cousin. I wasn't really too bothered about being left at home. I figured now was probably a good time to put in the DVD for her. I put the DVD in and allowed it to play while I was in the kitchen eating my dinner. From what I could hear, she had watched episodes 1 to 3 so far. I was just about to finish off my noodles when I heard my cousin screaming from the other room. Dropping everything, I ran into the living room and saw my cousin curled up on the floor screaming. I looked up at the TV and I could feel my heart in my throat. What I caught a glimpse of was one of the most horrifying things I had ever seen. It was what appeared to be a frame of Max and Ruby standing next to each other, in complete darkness. But what made it even more horrible was their lack of faces. They had lost their noses and mouths, apparently, and their eyes were replaced with big, black holes. The colors were a disgusting blood red, and the faint static in the background was visible. The sound was replaced with what sounded like the Max and Ruby theme song playing backwards, with the faint sound of static in the mix of it all. Had to be one of the most disturbing things I had ever seen, and it must have been on screen for at least 20 seconds before the screen went black and the television set turned off, which alone was weird because TVs don't usually turn off by themselves. I was able to calm my cousin down, telling her that it wasn't real and that she had just had a nightmare as she had fallen asleep in front of the TV. However, I knew very clearly in my mind that it was completely real. My parents had rung me up and told me that they were going to be out all night, so this was going to be the best opportunity to look at the DVD a little bit more closely. I didn't mention it to them, as soon as they had hung up, I grabbed the DVD before opening it up in my laptop. As soon as it loaded, I noticed that episode 004 had now been replaced with Rest in Peace, Mommy and Daddy, which sent a deep chill down my spine. Since my cousin was now asleep, I plugged in my earbuds so he could sleep without having to hear anything. Normally an episode of Max and Ruby would feature 3 short stories, but this episode only had 1. It started off quite happily. Max and Ruby were playing tag in the garden, but their parents were on the porch watching them play. However, something was off. The sound was playing in reverse, and the parents' faces were that of complete sadness. It panned to the mother and father, and in a voice of deep sorrow, the father spoke. "It's such a shame," he sighed. It then cut short to the sound of static and a loud scream followed by the sound of 2 people choking. The sounds felt so real it made me nearly physically sick. The scene then switched to show both Max and Ruby standing in front of what looked like a gravestone labeled, "Rest in peace, Mommy and Daddy." The 2 of them had no faces. At this point there was also no sound apart from faint static. The scene remained on screen for about a minute and a half before it quickly cut away to black. And then it changed scene once again, now showing Max and Ruby sitting in Ruby's room. Both of them were sobbing. The sobs were so realistic and heart-wrenching that it sounded like a recording from a real person mourning. What happened next was probably the most disgusting yet saddest thing I had ever witnessed. The scene had changed to Max sitting in his room. He was sitting on a chair with the noose hanging from the ceiling. He laced the noose around his neck. My computer screen quickly faded to black as static got louder. Almost instantly, it cut to Ruby walking out on her brother. She let out a horrified scream as the background turned black. The camera then panned on her face as the sound of a chair being kicked and the same choking from before began to play. The picture of Ruby's face stayed on screen for a good 5 minutes. This time her eyes had returned as the same gaping holes. Ruby then started crying, and as before, there was no other facial features. The static slowly grew louder and drowned out the sound of her cries. The scene cut to black with the loud static with the screen returned. Ruby was standing now on her own in a garden by 2 gravestones. One was labeled, "Rest in peace, Mommy and Daddy," and the other, "Rest in peace, brother." At that point, I had already been sick and was sitting all shaken. The episode seemed to have come to an end at last as an old computer noise started playing. I was about to eject the DVD when the same image came up like it did in the TV. This time, however, there was text above the 2 rabbits which said, "Death is our only release." There were no credits or anything else. It just stayed on this for a few seconds before the DVD finally popped out of my laptop. I sat there trying to contemplate what had happened. In my shock and fury, I had made the foolish decision to break the DVD up as much as I could before leaving the house. Afterwards, I shoved the pieces down the drain. Thankfully, though, I had kept a few screenshots and saved them to my laptop. The next couple of days went past without anything unusual happening. I had a few nightmares about the DVD, but that was all. My cousin had gone back home along with the rest of her family. It was late last night. It was a late night and my parents had gone out for dinner, leaving me alone to watch television. I heard what sounded like someone posting something to the door. At this point, the DVD had completely left my mind since I hadn't told anybody about it for a while. However, it all came flooding back when I looked down at that letter in front of me. It was just messily folded up and it said, "Death is our only release." Well, my little shadows, this was a pasta that a lot of you guys really wanted me to narrate, and here you all are. I want to apologize as well if this video, or any ones after that, are late in this week. Where I live at, we've had to deal with the recent hurricane that pretty much knocked out a good bit of our power in my apartment. So again, apologies for that. With all that said and done, however, this pasta was certainly a roller coaster, wasn't it? I honestly haven't looked back on the story in quite some time, but I'm glad that I did, because there are a lot of issues that I have with this pasta. However, before I get into that, I would think it would only be appropriate to provide a little bit of history about this creepypasta in order to gain a little bit more of a context and a perspective on why this story is as poorly made as it is. To start off, this creepypasta originally was the last actual lost episode creepypasta, specifically in 2013-14, I think, before the subject itself was officially blacklisted from the official creepypasta wiki site. Now, I do know that creepypasta wiki admins do tend to make some exceptions to this rule, but it isn't very common, so I'm still going to stick with the story being the last one officially accepted. Shockingly enough, when I first read this pasta when it was first created, it was, in my mind at the time, a relatively good creepypasta, especially given the fact that most other Lost episode stories basically were the bottom of the barrel, to say it nicely, when it came to quality. In fact, not only was it looked upon as being rather original, the story actually became a trending story with a crap ton of hits on not just the official site, but also on YouTube as well. I remember when I had seen a few narrations of this pasta by just random people, and hell, it was doing pretty great, that view-wise, that is. There were a couple of people, one example being that creepy reading, that actually was very critical of this pasta, but the overall consensus with the creepypasta fandom was that it was a breath of fresh air. And it remained that way for a good while before finally being reviewed by other narrators and blasted for its poor writing, its overall condemnation of the story even gaining the level of popularity to even begin with by critics and others alike. Now this pasta, as of now, was removed from the official Wikia site, and is currently residing on Trollpasta, aka now Lolpasta wiki, where it still receives a ton of negative reviews from future readers, including myself, which leads me to my primary review. Let me start this review off by pointing out the story's primary issue, and that's the protagonist of the pasta itself. Now, I'm not sure about all of you, but I found this protagonist of the story to be really nothing else more than your typical Lost episode creepypasta protagonist, and this is already a major red flag with this pasta. To quote a few examples of the protagonist's cookie-cutter personality, I've narrowed it down just to 5 specific pieces. Number 1. The protagonist is trying to find a DVD/VHS tape/pirated copy of insert show name here, and is finding no success despite countless other shopping websites being available. Yes, Christmas was mentioned, but that doesn't really provide a whole lot of valid excuses as to why he/she can't seem to find a copy online, even if it's used. Number 2. The protagonist not questioning or even investigating the nature of said package when it came in looking like a crackhead on the verge of an orgasm made in his mother's basement. Seriously, who in their right mind would ever just accept something that somehow came out of nowhere? Shouldn't there be like some kind of, investigation, maybe a little bit of hesitation, or fucking hell, even a little bit of distrust at even considering giving something like this as a gift of all things? Number 3. The protagonist getting frightened over imagery on said disc, despite the images looking like they were created in MS Paint in 5 minutes. Seriously, these screenshots are absolute shit, while edited with Windows Movie Maker. It's honestly not even rational for somebody who is likely in their older teen/young adult to get terrified of something like that. I mean, I'm not even joking with any of you. I have seen these images. Even the first time reading this pasta, I wasn't even scared of them. I mean, look at the pictures. Look at the ones that are provided in the creepypasta, and tell me that these things don't look cheaply made. Hell, I could sit there and make something better in less than 5 minutes in freaking MS Paint. And that's saying something because I fucking hate MS Paint. But seriously, who in the hell gets terrified over a crappy little image like that, much less footage of like that? I mean, sure, there are exceptions to this rule, but the protagonist makes no mention of any kind of issues or the like that would justify his reaction, specifically any kind of, mental disorders, squeamishness. Hell, I don't care, a fucking phobia of red would be a better example, but there is no example included into this pasta, which in my honest viewpoint is just completely ridiculous. Number 4. The protagonist breaks the DVD into pieces. Yes, the protagonist did say, however, that it was a stupid decision, and I will give, credit where the credit is due. The protagonist at least acknowledged how stupid it was for him to do that, but it was still included into the story, and it doesn't exactly provide a whole lot except just sitting there and breaking a DVD into pieces. Like, Many other different cartoon, lost episode, video game pastas don't involve the protagonist sitting there and grabbing said item, disc, whatever cartridge, and just snapping it into pieces, and then sitting there and taking a shit on top of it. Honestly, that would have been a nice little, change of pace, not gonna lie. And number 5. The protagonist makes no effort to try and get his explanation as to how or why this happened. Yes, I do know that there are pasta protagonists that do this at the end of most Lost episode creepypastas, oftentimes doing it in an awful way with things like demons, ghosts, blood, death, etc. But if something like this genuinely freaked you the fuck out, why are you not trying to get at least a couple of extra answers? I mean, there's so much that's empty with the story that could have been filled in that just wasn't, because the protagonist didn't even bother to try and find any kind of explanation. Oh my freaking gosh, do I even need to begin to mention the abundance of cliches in this creepypasta? There are more cliches in this pasta than there are mites chewing away at my dead skin cells on my eyebrows, and that's saying a lot, because there's millions of them. However, in order to help people, and including future writers, avoid things like this when writing a pasta, I've listed all of them in order, while giving commentary for each one of them. Let's get into that. Number 1. Looking for a DVD/VHS tape on eBay. Seems to me that this pasta couldn't have gone out of its way to try and come up with something new when it comes to actually procuring said film. Out of all the websites that are mentioned in finding a spooky video, eBay has to be one of the most commonly used lost episode pasta tropes, which is a major problem, especially for a pasta that's supposedly decent. It's honestly as bad as saying that you got said tape DVD at a garage sale for free from some creepy old man with dementia. It's already just been a paragraph into the shitfest, and we've already hit with the classical cliche already that's already making my blood boil. Of course, the protagonist doesn't actually buy anything, which I will admit is a bit different compared to how most things go out, but it really isn't much in relations to being a difference, and it certainly doesn't make up for the already crappy startup of this pasta. Number 2. Said DVD/tape comes into the mail with no logical explanation whatsoever. While I will admit that this isn't as common of a cliche, although if I am wrong, please let me know, it's still an eye-roller of a concept. However, it's made all the worse given how there is not only no explanation as to how this was even sent to the protagonist, but the sheer convenience of it happening just a few days after the protagonist was looking for a DVD of Max and Ruby online. I mean, I can't be the only one here that sees something wrong with this, right? I mean, if the author of this story had actually given at least an explanation as to how it's happened at the end of the story, instead of giving us that shitty phrase at the end of the pasta, but we'll get to that later, then I could see this being something that could potentially actually happen. Something a little bit more realistic that could actually make somebody think. But again, we get nothing explaining this. Not even a hint at, somebody who could have sent it. In my opinion, just not sitting there and providing any level of a logical explanation is just annoying. This author could have provided some kind of reasoning. I mean, a delivery package being misplaced by the mailman, hackers tracking his address down because it wasn't using a VPN. Hell, even ninjas from the planet Zora sent to conquer the Earth with George Jetson flaccid dick as their ruler could have made a lot more sense than just absolutely nothing explaining anything. Number 3. The DVD being perfectly fine before all hell breaks loose. I hate this cliche. I fucking hate this cliche. This cliche alone takes away any kind of logic, any kind of reasoning, any kind of believability that could have been included in the pasta, and burned it down, shit on it, burned the shit with it, nuked it, collected its ashes, shot it with a rocket launcher before being dumped into a porta potty to mix in with the shit and piss to be forever desecrated for all eternity. It's that bad. I don't get how something like this could even remotely be considered, much less written down on a piece of paper, given how fucking illogical it is. I mean, really, why is it that a DVD, which the protagonist of the story watched in full the first time around, might I add, was all fine and dandy, a perfectly cherry episode when it was first watched? You'd think like something like that god-awful scary episode would have played while the protagonist was giving it a watch over the first time, but apparently not. It was perfectly fine. No issues. No spooky scary bunnos, nothing but a cherry set of episodes of Max and Ruby burned onto a DVD-R disc. Simple as that. Well, apparently not, given how the episode changed once the niece starts watching it for the first time. Again, how the hell is this possible? And no, don't give me any kind of hacker bullshit. This isn't an explanation for this occurring, given how, if that was the case, the protagonist would have likely triggered it the first time he watched the damn episodes. Again, no explanation provided. Not like there would have been one to begin with. And again, it pisses me off to no end. I find this inclusion to just be a lack of effort on the author's part here. But holy hell, did all logic die when I read that part. And I think what makes this whole situation worse is the fact that nobody else has ever taken this major plot hole into account as well. Any kind of narration I have seen that there's a review never actually goes out of their way and points this problem out. This is a problem with many creepypasta episodes, and especially for a story like this that was originally meant to be decent. I mean, again, why is it a major problem? Can someone explain it? Number 4. The episode itself. This is primarily the main beef of what is wrong with this pasta. Everything that went on in this episode is laughable to say the least and just lazy at worst. I've read a ton of lost episode pastas in my time, and this episode is just sad. I mean, where do I even begin? We have the following issues. Number 1. The music being played in reverse. Blood red. Color/gore. Static taking over the screen. Suicide. Characters acting completely out of character with no proper explanation. MS Paint screenshots. Crying/depression for no valid reason. No proper storyline for said episode. Jump scares. God-awful quote. "Death is our only wish." Black eyes, lacking proper facial expressions or even proper body parts. Everything happening all at once instead of building up to the actual scary part. Gravestones, main character death because why the fuck not? There are likely many more that I'm not even including, but people, this is completely inexcusable, even for lost episode standards. Hell, some of the more crappier pastas at least have some set storyline or reasoning, regardless of how poorly executed it is, as to why a character is reacting the way that they are. This pasta, on the other hand, gives nothing but a fuck all reason for being the way that it is. And if any of you have ever read other edits that have been made to the story that originally was on the wiki site, you'd likely see that the story even included Ruby, with blue eyes, saying how we were the reason they all died, specifically because the protagonist never watched their show. And that's it. It's just so damn bad. I don't even know what to even say about the story. My final thoughts on this pasta are not great to say the least. To put it bluntly, this creepypasta was horrible in every aspect of the book. Cliched, horrid garbage that should have never seen the light of day, much less gain the popularity it did with the community. Although I'll admit, I actually did like this story when it first came out, so I will admit I was part of the problem itself. Overall, the pasta in question was just bad, nothing less than that. My final rating of this pasta is as follows. For the storyline, 1 out of 10. The protagonist, a 0 out of 10. Realism, -6 out of 10. Enjoyability, 0 out of 10. And my final overall score, 0.5 out of 10. This pasta just failed in every single way possible. And again, the reason why this story... I still don't understand why this creepypasta was ever popular to begin with. Hopefully, though, the author who wrote the story has gone on to make better stories, and I hope so. I really do. Because this pasta was just not great at all. Although I will go out of my way and say that the grammar in this pasta was pretty good. I will say that, but that's really not something to really, clap at, because everybody has to be good at, freaking writing, otherwise their story just becomes a major mess, but that's neither here nor there. With that being said, however, my little shadows, this is simply my own personal opinion. My own little sad personal opinion. And if you disagree with it, that's perfectly fine too. We're all entitled to our own opinions and relations in regards to these creepypastas, and this is simply just my own personal thoughts. I would like to hear what you guys have to sit there and think about this creepypasta. But more importantly, what did you guys think? Did you guys enjoy this story? Did you guys not? And personally, what would you have done to help make the story a whole lot better? I would really love to hear your thoughts down in the comment section below. And if I happen to miss anything, please let me know. Anyway, thanks again for watching today's episode of My Little Shadows, and if you liked this video, make sure to like this video, comment down below, and subscribe, and make sure to hit the bell notification, as that gives you brand new notifications to any brand new videos that I make, that week. Anyway, thanks again, My Little Shadows. I'll be seeing you guys in the next video, and like always, roll the outro, because I'm out. In fear and surprise, as your eyes widen, your mouth goes dry with each battered breath. You try to scream, your mind begs to leave, glued to your computer screen. The killers they slash, the tapes burn and crash. The cartridge you bought will be your final haunt. The rituals of hate will seal your fate. The tears you shed will be from the fear-gripping portrait, nightmarish gore-filled, terrorizing, hateful, burning, violent, rage-inducing, knife-slashing, blood-splattering, silent screams. Only time will tell if you will escape this online hell. Your horror-filled obsessions will come with its own regressions. Your pathetic screams will not be heeded in any way, because your nightmares will come at any day.